It's 2020 Independent Wrestler of the Year Warhorse here, and you are about to listen to the PWI Podcast. So sit down, shut the hell up, open your ears, because we are about to rule some ass!
This program, of course, is presented by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the most widely read, widely sold, and respected wrestling magazine in the world today.
This is Pro Wrestling Illustrated Podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, back once again with my co-host, Brian Solomon. How's it going, Brian?
Pretty good, Al. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, and joining us this week for the first time, a relatively new voice, certainly here in the podcast and also in the pages of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Righteous Reg. How's it going, Reg?
It's going awesome. Thanks for having me, Al. Thanks, Brian. I appreciate you guys. This is super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Like me, you were at WrestleMania, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to have you on. But why don't you tell everybody a bit about yourself? You joined the magazine last year, was it?
Yeah, it's been almost a year now. I think the first issue I was on was the last PWI 500. I, of course, got there because I made my own version of the 500 called the Black Wrestlance 500 of the best Black wrestlers in the whole world. Took forever to do. People are crazy. I can't believe I did it. It's coming up again, and my brain is already like 500 wrestlers again. What are you thinking? But yeah, from that spawned talking to Kevin and getting to be a part of PWI, which is amazing. I can't believe it every time a new issue comes out that my name's in it. It's so cool.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you, and the writing you've done about Black wrestlers is one of the reasons we want to have you on this episode, because in a lot of ways, WrestleMania was kind of a historical milestone.
It was.
And we want to get into some of that. So we will. Also, later after the show, stay tuned for an interview with up-and-comer in Ring of Honor, Dak Draper. I got to see him wrestle Jonathan Gresham at the 19th anniversary show. Really impressed by his work, so got him on, and we spoke earlier today on a range of topics. You know, his journey to getting into Ring of Honor, his time in WWE developmental, the future of Ring of Honor, and a lot more. We also even talked about how kind of counterintuitive how being tall in wrestling, he's about 6'5", can sometimes work against you. So a really fun conversation with a guy who I think has got a very, very bright future. So stay tuned for that. Right now, let me tell you about the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It's got one of the stars of WrestleMania on the cover, Bianca Belair, the new SmackDown Women's Champion. It's our WrestleMania issue, including a fun feature that I put together looking at 8 alternative WrestleMania main events. We call it kind of WrestleMania what ifs. And it was a lot of fun to put together. But a lot more here. Brian, I read your column about kind of lesser known WrestleMania stats. That was a lot of fun too. How much work was it putting together? Did you keep tabs on this?
You know, I used to for years. When I worked at WWE, it was like one of my things that I did. They thought I was nuts because like the internet, the internet stuff wasn't as big back then. So I would be like, they'd be like, why would fans care about this? And I'm like, you guys are too close to this to understand. People care about these stats. And I did. So like a lot of it was, I had to just update. I hadn't updated in a few years and I had to go into it and figure it out. And like, I remember even back then, things like, Goldust having like the worst WrestleMania record of all time, things that I never hear people talk about. So it was just kind of cool to be able to, put it into print again. It's been so long since I had a chance to do that.
Yeah, and I saw you trying to take credit for the Undertaker's streak in there.
I never make a big thing about that until that column. I just felt like it was relevant to what we were talking about, and I stand by that. That the WWE magazine played a big part in getting that record over. I will stand. So
the day that Taker's on stage getting his Hall of Fame induction, he better thank you.
That's right.
Maybe you should be the one to induct him. Anyhow, there's a lot more in this issue. Our hot seat interview with Bianca Belair on the cover that Kevin put together. We got features on Miro, on Jonathan Gresham, who I just mentioned, Ring of Honor Pure Champion, on Shotzi Blackheart. A big feature looking at the independent scene in wrestling. on KG Muto. There's a name, I'd say from the past, but still very much from the present, all these years later. So tons here. You want to go to PWI-online.com and pick it up, whether you want to order the one issue or download a digital edition or subscribe. And the longer you subscribe, the deeper the savings. It's the way to go. We're working on the PWI poll before long. As Reg mentioned, we're going to be doing the PWI 500. So it never stops over here at Pro Wrestling Illustrated. You don't want to miss an issue. So go to PWI-online.com to subscribe. Also subscribe to our free newsletter that Kevin puts together, the PWI Weekly, completely free and loaded with bonus content. Subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a positive review. What else? Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at official PWI. Pick up the Pro Wrestling Illustrated line of t-shirts, please, at prowrestlingtees.com, and also whatamaneuver.net. And send us an email here at pwi@kappapublishing.com or PWI Podcast at outlook.com. All right. So a lot there. Reg, let's talk about WrestleMania. How many WrestleManias have you gone to? Curious.
This was my 9th WrestleMania.
What was your first?
This is 2 nights. First one was WrestleMania 26 in Arizona. Okay. Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, the quote unquote last Shawn Michaels match. We don't talk about that other match ever. Never, ever.
Yeah.
His last match in hair, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Brian, when you were with WWE, was it like automatic that you had to be at WrestleMania every year?
No, in the early years, supposedly it was, from what I heard, when the company was smaller. Like if you didn't go, it was really like they looked at you like you're not a team player. But by the time I was there in early 2000s, like the company was already so big, like hundreds and hundreds of people, that they would kind of choose who got to go. So it almost became like a perk, like every year. Oh, great, you're going to get to go. You're going to get to go. So I was there for 7 years. And I know this sounds crazy, but I only went to 2 when I was there.
Wow.
And it was supposed to be probably more like 4 out of the 7 years, but we don't need to get into details. There were political things that happened a couple times that prevented me from going, but no trash, but still.
Yeah.
No trash bags.
We'll get into the trash bags.
I went to 17 at the Astrodome, which really made it.
Well, that's a good one.
Oh wow, that's the one.
And I went to 23 in Detroit, the one with Trump. So
yes, I was there. Yeah,
nice contrast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be like the annual family vacation before we had a family, just me and my wife. We'd try to go most years. And then when we had kids, it kind of slowed down. And then the last few years, we've been able to go to a few of them. And especially after COVID, we were anxious we thought it'd be a good time. And it was a good time. I had a great time. Yeah. Reg, did you have a good time at the show this year?
I had a super insane good time after the rain died down, of course.
Oh, the rain was crazy. Yeah. One of my takeaways, I think I mentioned it with Brian at the last episode, is I think they need to think long and hard about no longer doing WrestleMania outdoors. I think
definitely
too much of a risk. And I was contemplating while I was there, what happens if they cannot get the show in?
Right.
Week? What do you do with all these people who bought tickets, that traveled? It's just too big a risk.
Yeah, there was a moment there where before I had even got into the arena where I was like, this could not happen. This could be the first WrestleMania that's canceled. We're all here waiting right now for this. Yeah. What is going to possibly happen? I thought they could move the whole thing to the second day, which would be a thing, I guess. But I mean, luckily the rain died down and it all worked out.
It died down for the talent that had the roof in the ring. But since I got back, I've been able to see some of WrestleMania on TV. And I don't think it really captures night one, how we were soaked all night long.
Right.
I know.
Yeah.
I got back to the hotel and hung up all my clothes soaking wet, and the next morning they were still soaking wet. So
right.
The rain was pretty persistent all night long. I know that I was shivering in my seat.
Right.
Came through watching the show, but it was bad. Yeah. Yeah, the next day was worse, but it ended right before the show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they do need to think about this, because that was insane. That was too much.
Yeah. And you, I went to WrestleCon on the Friday, but other than that, I didn't get in all the shows. I wasn't even aware there was many. There were that many shows, but you took in a bunch of shows over that weekend, right?
Yeah, I went to a bunch of different independent wrestling shows. GCW presented The Collective, and they had like maybe 12 shows. I think they had 4 shows a day. And I ended up going to about 6 of them. I went to 4 of their shows and 2 other shows. I went to Action Wrestling presented a show. Action Wrestling and Sup Wrestling together presented a show. And I also went to this New Texas Pro show. They're a company out of Texas. They had a show in Tampa. It was incredible. A lot of great talent. Brian Keith, AJ Gray was there. Mysterious Q. It was a really great WrestleMania weekend type showcase of talents. And then but the best show that I went to was a part of The Collective for the culture. It actually might be the best wrestling show I've ever been to in my entire life. So yeah, there was too much wrestling going on, which is anytime there's too much wrestling, I'm having a great time because I love too much wrestling. It's my favorite.
What was it like from a safety protocol perspective? Because as much as I was up for going to WrestleMania, I knew it was going to be outdoors. I knew masks were going to be required. There's going to be a fair amount of distance with them only selling about 20,000 seats. I got to say, I was a little uneasy about maybe going to any indie shows, not knowing what the protocols would be. So what was it like at those shows?
To tell the truth, at the Collective show, the protocols weren't great. The whole thing was outside, but there wasn't any. Yeah, that helped, but there wasn't any like checking temperatures or mask checks or any of that. I'm vaccinated, so I was like, I'm gonna just be in my mask over here on the side. But like, if you're not, I think there was moments where it got pretty sketchy. I think so at the Collective show, at least. I think they could have been doing better at regulating what was going on at the show. I don't think there were some people that were just maskless. They didn't care about anything, that like they just stumbled in, they saw a wrestling show and came in, how that happens sometimes. It wasn't the best at the Collective show. At the other shows, they were taking temperatures and kind of regulating the distances. But I mean, I guess they were just relying on the whole thing being outside, which I guess they thought would help, but it
does. I mean, it does make a difference. I mean, one of the kind of, I don't know if it was funny, but sort of ironic moments at WrestleMania was they went through all those precautions, and then the show starts and the rain delay begins, and all social distancing be damned. Everybody was packed in the concourses, like huddled together, trying to stay warm and dry. But even then, the vast majority of folks had masks on and trying to keep their distance. So, I really liked there being so much space, right?
Same here.
Same here. Like and I know it's just a product of the pandemic, and once they can go back to packing the place, they will. But there really is something to be said for just like, man, I had the whole row in front of me. I could put my feet up. It's not like that shoulder to shoulder kind of thing. So
you can get up out of your seat and go to the bathroom, no problem. Anything like that. Yeah, definitely.
Bathroom lines for food, all that. So part of that was nice. But let's talk about, we've gone over the results, Brian and I. But having you here, we did want to talk about sort of the racial implications of WrestleMania and how historic it was. Why don't you just tell us in your words, the significance of 2 Black women headlining WrestleMania night 1, of Bobby Lashley retaining the world title, and anything else that jumped out to you as historically significant?
Yeah, definitely starting out the show with Bobby Lashley as going into the WrestleMania as the world champion, only 3rd Black WWE champion ever in the history, to go in the first match and to retain, the first Black man to ever retain the WWE championship at WrestleMania. The Rock never did it. He would be the only one that would be able to do it. The Rock never did it. Bobby Lashley did it, and he had a dominant win. There was moments there where most people were like, this is going to be Drew's crowning moment. This is good. People were telling me this all week, and I'm like, hey, stop saying that to me. I don't want to hear that. They're just like, this is Drew's time. He has to get his moment in front of the crowd. This and this and this. And then for Lashley to say, no, none of that. I'm going to actually dominate this guy, lock him in the hurt lock, make it look like I really won this. And for him to get a victory like that and to retain was amazing. Great way to start the show. I was like, okay, from here, everything's going to be great. And then so to go from that, the first match, to the main event being 2 Black women main eventing WrestleMania for a world championship. Like, it's really hard to kind of put into words how that feels as a Black wrestling fan who's been to 9 WrestleManias, who's been watching wrestling for 30 years, who's seen the bottom of Black wrestling fandom to, you know, Kofi losing in 9 seconds, which I'm never going to ever be over. I'm going to take that forever. Every day I'm going to think about Kofi being jobbed out to Brock Lesnar. I hate it. It just makes me angry. But to go from that to Bianca and Sasha having this amazing match, on top of it just being an historic moment that, you know, who knew we would ever get to it. The match was incredible. I've watched it 2 or 3 times since then, just because they did so much and I wanted to catch all the little moments. For them to go to that and just have this incredible match and the emotions and the moment and the crowds all into it, all the elements were set up to have this great match and moment, and they executed. It was perfect. I loved it.
Yeah. Brian, do you think all those things combined, 2 Black women headlining WrestleMania Night 1, Bobby Lashley going in as champion and retaining, do you think that all that happens if the country didn't go through everything it's gone through over the last year?
You mean like pandemic wise, or
no? Well,
I
mean, I guess it's all together. But when you talk about George Floyd and the racial reckoning in the U.S., was that maybe a wake up call for WWE in some ways?
You know, I would like to think yes. I mean, just deep down, because I worked there, I just, you know, it's a corporate entity, and it's not the most. Here's the thing I compare it to. When they did the whole women's revolution, right? And everybody thought, wow, okay, they're finally like waking up and being really progressive, thinking about the role of women in wrestling. And it was like, okay, so yeah, but okay, they're 35 years behind like every other word and event. And they're doing it. They're acting like they're on the forefront of this. And they're doing it really, they're responding to what they see as a supply-demand need as a corporate entity. And so when they started kind of dropping the ball and fumbling with the women's stuff, and people started, you know, being so shocked about it, I wasn't shocked, because I know that to them internally, this is like, you know, it's a calculated corporate decision made to like capitalize, and I mean that in the literal sense of the term, to capitalize on this. And I feel like such a wet blanket for like putting it this way, but like internally, I just feel like they're doing this now, yes, because it felt like the right moment to do it, but from like a business standpoint. But you know what though? That's not. I mean, maybe that's not always the worst thing in the world, because sometimes that's how change happens, you know, like especially in a capitalist society, when people see there's a way to make money from it. But that can be how change happens. No matter what their intentions are, you still get there in a way. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I just get very wary. Like I'm always ready for them to disappoint in those areas, though. That's my only thing. But let me tell you, but for that show and on that night and on that day, they did not. I mean, that was history. That was a moment. I said it when we talked about it last time in our 17-hour WrestleMania recap. That's like that moment of the two of them, Sasha and Bianca, like staring at each other, and she's tearing up and everything. You're gonna see that in WrestleMania packages,
right?
And in WWE packages for the next like 30 years. You're gonna
forever,
yeah.
Reg, I think Brian's right, but again, is it a bad thing? Or I feel like there have been times where WWE in the past has just straight up pandered, right? And have put people in positions only because of their color or or whatever, their identity, who otherwise, I won't name names, but there are people who've come to mind, and not necessarily just Black wrestlers, but when they've targeted certain countries, they'll find somebody who is from a country and they'll push them all the way. This feels like, yes, I think the events of last year played a factor in the presentation this year, but also everybody who got that spotlight very much deserved it, right? I mean, Bobby Lashley has earned it. not just over 16 years or 17 years, but over a killer last year and last few months, really breaking out. And certainly you could say the same for Sasha and Bianca, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's the thing that kind of makes it, is all these people have built to this moment. It wasn't just like, okay, now what do we do? Let's just throw, there's a black person right there. Let's throw him in the match. It was like, it's like, it all worked out. But I can totally see what Brian's saying, because they do try to capitalize. Just look at like the Bad Bunny situation. They knew, like, if we get this guy, our Hispanic viewership could certainly go up. And, they just got numbers that it went up pretty significantly with Bad Bunny. So I know that they do that. We see it, and it happens all the time. But I mean, I guess that's how we have to take it. I hate to say it like that, but like, if that's how I have to get 2 black women in the main event, give it to me. You know what I mean? So they earned it. They killed it. It worked out. Even how they got there, who knows? We got here.
Yeah. I also think that WWE, I'm sorry, Brian, they sometimes, and rightfully so, because over the years there have been a lot of missteps, but they sometimes don't get the credit that they deserve for diversifying the roster as much as they have. I just, before we got on, I looked at the whole roster of champions on the main brand, and half of them are people of color.
Right.
And that actually went down. I think before WrestleMania it was a little higher, but then New Day lost the titles. You only end up losing one because of Omos, but also Asuka lost the title. But up and down, if you go to NXT, there's a few more. I think 4 of the champions in NXT are people of color. So, Brian, I mean, does WWE maybe not get enough of a fair rap for the strides they've made on this?
Boy, you're just really trying to get me to say nice things. I think, sure, but again, it's very smart, and I one thing is, I don't think they get enough credit for being smart enough to read those situations. Like,
right,
it can be very ham-fisted and clumsy. Like, I feel that Jinder Mahal was like that, where it just felt like, why is this, guy who's essentially viewed as a jobber all of a sudden like beating the world,
right.
Like things like that. But look, it also gave us Eddie Guerrero. I mean, I was there when that happened, and there was a very conscious inside the company thing of like, we need a Latino superstar, like before Eddie, that like he fit what they were looking for. They were like, we have a huge demographic, that's a big part of our audience. They love us, and we need to do something. We need to give them somebody that could be like their whatever, their Rock, their Austin, their somebody. And they were looking for somebody, and Eddie Guerrero came along at the right time. But, he deserved that spot. And like, if it wasn't for that way of thinking, we would have never had Eddie Guerrero, because a guy like that size, that type of style and everything, in another time, he would have never been given that spot ever in a million years. And it happened because he was there at the right time, and he had the right talent and the charisma they were looking for. So, I mean, it works. And we also can't forget, I mean, look, even in the history of the company, I mean, Vince, for all of his flaws, he's also his father's son. And if you look at the way his father ran things, that was always the MO, is looking at things from an ethnic point of view, and how could we give our fans a star that looks like them? That's how they got San Martino. That's how they got Pedro Morales and other people that weren't even world champions, but were major stars. They were thinking like, what ethnically, what type of people make up our audience? We have a lot of Greeks in the audience. Okay, let's give them Spiros Arion. We have a lot of Polish fans coming out. Well, we'll give them Ivan Putski. Like, they were always thinking like that. And I think that it is a tradition in that company that maybe is not looked on as favorably as it should be.
Yeah.
Because it never ends well. That's usually what happens. They start out great, and then they like beat Kofi in 9 seconds. Things like that happen.
Yeah.
And they viewed him as a failed experiment. You could just tell with the way they handled it, is that's how they saw it. Like, okay, next, this isn't working.
Exactly.
Reg, do you feel at all whether they have kind of turned a corner here and ushered in a new kind of enlightenment when it comes to this kind of thing? Or, as you touched on, do you think it's a fad, and before long, this passes, and we go back to mostly white main eventers, mostly white world champions?
I think they've turned the corner. I think with social media, they can't. Like they could see the feedback in real time. So like if they went back, we would let them know. They've turned the corner, and I think it's been a while. I remember there was one Survivor Series that was like there was a black wrestler in almost every match. It's been going on for a while. It's sometimes a little bit quiet, but I think they've turned the corner to going in the right direction, to continuing this to where it's even. It's not just like an overload of one or an overload of another. It's like it's warranted what's going on. Everybody's just getting a fair shot. It's not about these politics and things. So I think I want to confidently say that they have turned the corner, but it is WWE, and tomorrow, like they could just have a night of champions and switch all the champions and go back to where they were. So it's really hard.
Yeah. I mean, the upside is that it's not just like, again, what we were touching on, where it's not a situation where you've got a mostly white roster and there's some pressure on them to have some diversity among their title holders or the main event. So they call on the handful of minorities that are in the locker room. The entire roster is pretty diverse now, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
The people of color make up a pretty big chunk. I mean, I should do the math, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's half.
It's a lot, definitely.
Or around there, and when you include Hispanic wrestlers, Asian wrestlers. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way it works. If the people are around, then there's just more opportunity for everyone. The other topic I want to talk to you about coming out of WrestleMania was the Hall of Fame. This is another place where over the years their handling of diversifying the Hall of Fame sometimes I think has been I think ham-fisted is the term that Brian used. This year, were there any Black Hall of Famers outside of the Legacy Hall of Fame? I feel like every class they need one, and this year, I can't think of it. I mean,
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so.
Surprisingly, yeah. Does that bother you, or is it a good thing in that? Again, I think this is a place where in the past they have been like, well, who's Black that we could put in
right?
Yeah.
No, but it does bother me because I feel like there are wrestlers who deserve it, who could be in there, that they could find. Like it sometimes feels like, well, why is this person going in? They were only on one wrestling show, and you know what I mean? Like they do things like that, and I think there's a bunch of wrestlers that could definitely be in, and it wouldn't be weird that they're going in. So yeah, it does bother me a little bit. It gets a little bit frustrating. And then what they did with with the Black people they did put in, or, the Black woman they did put in, is pretty frustrating on top of it.
Johnson. Yeah, let's talk about that. So the controversy coming out of that was that they inducted Ethel Johnson, who was a Black female wrestler, I guess from the 50s. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah.
But they used the wrong photo. Is that right?
Right. What happens was they didn't contact the family for the whatever wing of the Hall of Fame that is. They didn't contact the family. They just were like, we're going to do this. And I guess they thought the family would be happy that we're showcasing. But what happens was they showed the wrong video. They showed footage of Sandy Parker, which is another Black woman wrestler who came up around the same time, but it wasn't Ethel Johnson. And they showed a picture of Babs Wingo, who was her sister. Instead, so essentially they showed a bunch of the wrong wrestlers trying to pay tribute to Ethel Johnson, and they didn't contact any of the families. So this was just a big surprise to them when they see these video packages giving them, but wait, this isn't even Ethel Johnson that they're showing on the screen right now. And it would have been way easier if they would have just said, hey, we're going to do this. Can we have footage, or can you guys collaborate on this? And they just didn't. They dropped the ball.
Yeah. Brian, how does something like that happen? And how big a deal is it?
Well, one of the reasons it happens is, unfortunately, what this Legacy Hall of Fame wing is about is it's like their backdoor way of inducting people that they don't really think are worth like spending a full induction like 10-15 minutes on. They don't want to do that. And B, they don't want to offer either them or the family an actual Legends contract. I mean, that's
that makes
the real
sense.
deal. Because Hall of Fame is money. These people get offered a deal, like you get percentages of merchandise sales if they want to do books about you and blah, blah, blah. So it's like a way that, I mean, in most cases for Legacy, the people are passed away, but it's a way for at least the family to, get some kind of something. Like I remember one year, I'm pretty sure about this, like with Bruiser Brody, they actually wanted to do the full induction with Brody. They wanted to do it. And his widow, Barbara, was like, I want nothing to do with this. I want nothing to do with you. He would have not wanted anything to do with this. Sorry, see you later. And then they were like, yeah, we'll just put him in the legacy because we don't need any cooperation. Or it's basically.
I see. Okay.
It's even less real than the actual Hall of Fame induction.
Right.
In a way. It's just like, we're just going to say your name on TV and say you're in the Hall of Fame, which there's no building or anything, and no one gets a ring or a contract or anything. Like, it's really weird. It's the whole legacy. I have mixed feelings about it. I like it as a way to at least mention the names of people that deserve recognition that they're never going to give it to. So it's better than nothing. But it can sometimes be more of like a backhanded compliment than anything else. Sometimes, this time is a classic example.
Yeah. So I've got the class up here. The only black wrestler that went in with kind of the main class for both years, 2020, 2021, was Titus O'Neil with the Warrior Award.
Right.
And then the 2020 legacy included Brickhouse Brown, and the 2021 included Ethel Johnson and Pez Whatley. And Pez Whatley, God bless him, I know he was a journeyman and contributed a lot, but he's one of those names where I'm like, I remember Pez Whatley as a job guy. And I don't know that. I know in some territories he was a little more than that. But is that a name who you would associate as a Hall of Fame wrestler?
Maybe not at this moment. He can maybe get in eventually. I think the spot that they put him in is where he deserves to be. Like, he deserves to be a legacy one. Yeah, I think so. Not like this guy's a Hall of Fame career. Look at his resume. He's the best, but he earned his keep. I think if you talk to an older generation of wrestling fans, they would say that he did some things for them.
Well, I guess an interesting thing to explore with this is a reality that, I don't want to say grade on a curve, but when you look at black wrestlers, they do deserve a different consideration, especially wrestlers from 30 years ago more, because they dealt with some challenges that their white counterparts. So it wasn't necessarily a level playing field. So maybe you have to look beyond what they accomplished in the ring, because they had a lot of forces working.
Exactly. Just being there, just like going back to Ethel Johnson, there was a documentary called Lady Wrestlers that this man Chris Bornea directed, and she talked about how in the 50s Madison Square Garden wouldn't let them in to wrestle. Like, the women couldn't get inside the building to even wrestle. So like, that's what I was saying for the WrestleMania main event. Like, to go from women not even being able to get inside the arena to them main eventing WrestleMania is like insane. So yeah, I would think, Pez Whatley dealt with a lot of different things than Bianca Belair has to deal with. Pez Whatley dealt with a lot of different things than Bobby Lashley has to deal with. So, I mean, just going based off that, I would say most of them probably deserve to be in the Hall of Fame just for what they had to put up with. You hear some of the stories that Butch Reed used to tell, you hear some of the stories that Ron Simmons used to tell, and you're just like, how did you survive in this profession? Like, I would have been out the first day hearing all this crazy stuff they try to put them through.
Butch Reed's a name. I mean, that should be in the Hall of Fame, I would think.
Pez Whatley got stuck with, I mean, he had a pretty good run for some of the Southern territories. Like, he did well in Memphis, and he had a good run in Crockett, but he also had to deal with getting repackaged with, like, he got the Saba Simba treatment for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Where he was Shaska Whatley, and he had to, like, do that in order to get over. So yeah, I mean, like, that's things that a white wrestler would not have to go through.
Right.
They might have to go through different kinds of things, but definitely not that.
Reg, what are some names, black names, that you think are missing from the WWE Hall of Fame?
Immediately, Too Cold Scorpio always comes to mind. Like, how is Too Cold Scorpio not in here? I can't even think of another black name without saying Too Cold Scorpio, man. Like, the 450 splash in the early 90s on TV was blowing people's mind. He's still wrestling today. I watched him wrestle at WrestleMania weekend, and he's 55 years old, I think. Like, how is he not in this thing? What are you guys doing? What's going on? And he better get the big all of the stuff. He needs the induction. He needs all of it. It's too cold Scorpio, man. It drives me crazy for sure. Just that one name. I don't even want to say any other names because he needs to be in there.
Well, you mentioned Butch Reed before, and that's another one I'd think deserves a place in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't put him in this year with the. He possibly could be. I would have to look it up for sure.
Yeah.
Vince gonna want to. If Vince inducts Too Cold Scorpio, he's gonna want to do it as Flash Funk, right?
See, that's the. That's the thing.
But I'm okay with that, in as much as it is the WWE Hall of Fame. It's somewhat oblivious. It's like when they inducted Scott Hall, insisted that he go in as Razor Ramon.
Right? I think they did for Kevin Nash too.
Right. Yeah, and I guess the idea is that was the WWE creation. Somewhat oblivious to that wasn't nearly like the high point of his career, and the same would go with Flash Funk. But I don't know. He got to wear the cool hat and the. I wouldn't mind that.
Hey, as long as he gets in at this point, just put him in. He could be anybody.
Yeah. So let's talk about some fallout from WrestleMania. In terms of the on-air product. Frankly, there wasn't a whole lot, right? I mean, after WrestleMania, there's always this thought about like sort of, where they're going to pivot to now, what are the new directions? And there aren't a whole lot. I mean,
no,
they're going right back to the well with Lashley and McIntyre. It looks like maybe Cesaro getting a push on the SmackDown side. But the bigger stories, I think, were kind of backstage at WrestleMania. You had the latest kind of spring cleaning after WrestleMania with them dropping 10 wrestlers. The biggest of those being Samoa Joe. I think that was the one name that really jumped out. Brian, how big a loss is that? I guess what's up in the air is what can he really do, right? I mean, how physically limited is he? And how important a potential free agent is he out there?
Oh, I mean, I have no doubt he's going to get cleared, and I have no doubt it's going to be a big deal. He struck me as one of those guys that were, it's like you're weighing health against being overly cautious, and it feels like a Daniel Bryan situation almost,
right?
Like he's clearly thinking, I am stuck in the only place that's not going to clear me to wrestle. And I got to get out of here, or I got to get cleared somehow. And so maybe it's not the worst thing in the world for him. However, the flip side of that is maybe in this case, WWE is actually right in being overly cautious and not wanting these guys to get crippled or, die in the ring, God forbid, or things like that. But it does feel like that kind of a situation. I feel like he was almost being held prisoner. So I have no doubt, for example, he's somebody that's going to be an AEW person, and he's probably going to do great things there. I mean, he's going to be really big there. But it's just one of those things that it seems to become their new annual tradition now, right? I mean, I don't know if it's been more than the 2 years, but it feels like this year, last year.
Yeah, no, it goes back a while. Yeah. Last year's was, I think, particularly sort of gratuitous because it was so sweeping. I forget what it was, but it was like 24 or more. Yeah. And it came in the middle of the pandemic, and they had just, reported record profits. I think outside of Joe, and even then understanding there are some of these issues with, his physical ability, I don't think there were many names in there that were like jaw dropping or anything like that. I am somewhat surprised that they would, whether they have that much use for him or not, that they wouldn't hold on to Joe just to keep him from the competition, because he absolutely could be a difference maker, right? I mean, you think about what they could do with him in AEW. He'd go right to the top of the cards, right, Reg?
Right. Yeah, I think Samoa Joe's probably the biggest one, because not even just AEW, he could show up in Ring of Honor, he could show up in Impact Wrestling, he could show up in New Japan, and just like that, he's going to be at the top of any card of any company that he goes to. He's such a major player. That's why we're all like, you guys let Samoa Joe go? You know what he can do? I guess that comes back to the health thing and the caution thing, because I'm like, there has to be a bigger issue here. There's no way that they're just going to let Samoa Joe go, knowing that AEW is going to immediately call this guy to come in. Like, there's no way they're not trying to talk to him, So it's a huge surprise. I hope that the health thing is not too much, and I hope that he can come back, because he's going to be world champion, like, immediately.
Yeah. I mean, he's getting up there. That's the one thing, right? He's not a young man anymore, so it's not like AEW and anybody else would be picking up like the hot new thing that they can count on for the next 10 years. But you can, if he's healthy, you could go right into a program with a Kenny Omega or a John Moxley,
Right.
Or a Chris Jericho, and have a 1 or 2 year run where you really maximize what you can get out of him. And the shame of it on WWE side is that Joe would have been such a great opponent for Roman Reigns, this
Right.
version of Roman Reigns, that it's a real shame that they didn't get to it. The other kind of big story, and something that's just breaking over the last day related to this, is this whole, I don't know what they call it, Trashbag gate with Mickie James. And I guess the long and the short of it is that she posted a photo on her social media of her belongings arriving to her. WWE sent it to her in a trash bag. And Triple H and Stephanie, understandably, I guess, sort of like just appalled by this, and apologized profusely and said that they let go of the people who were responsible for that. And it would seem related to that. I guess I don't know for sure. Mark Carano, who had been their head of talent for a while, got his pink slip over the last day or so. Brian, I've got some thoughts on this, but was this the right thing to do? Obviously, optics is going to play a big role in this. I wonder. I think it has everything to do with it, right? I think it just looks really bad. But is this an overreaction?
If Mickie had not had the wherewithal to make it public, this would not be happening.
Right.
Because I think we saw, I don't know if you saw, but this is, and I was not even aware of this. This is something they've been doing for years.
Yeah.
Strictly female talent. So Maria Kanellis said, "Hey, this happened to me too. I thought I was the only one." And Jillian Hall was like, "Hey, me too. I thought I was the only one." And no men said this. So it seems like this was a thing they were doing.
And when's the last time Jillian worked? It's been a long time since she's worked there.
Like 10 years ago, maybe, or more.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure off the top of my head how long Carano has been the head of talent relations, but I'm pretty sure that it would even predate him. So it's weird and just like toxic and dysfunctional and not shocking to me, because it's like the culture there can really be like that. Everybody talks about it, but sometimes you forget. You think like, well, okay, it's 2021 and everything's changing and blah. There's still a lot of messed up stuff that goes on in the wrestling business, and the corporate side of that company, and I can only speak for that company, is very much like informed by the mentality of the road still, even to this day. So it's like the mentality of Randy Orton, defecating in people's bags, for example. Like that mentality is it carries over to all aspects of the company. And so when things like this happen, it's almost like a reminder of that kind of thing. And I from a practical point of view, forget about even being kind of fair-minded about it. Wouldn't you think that this would get you in some kind of trouble? Somebody's going to raise a fuss over this, that someone's going to say, "Hey, they sent me all my stuff in a garbage bag." And then there's people, of course, there's always people. There's people on Twitter going like, "Well, people don't realize that this keeps the moisture out. And this is why they're just trying to." There are really people that are, and look,
oh my God,
I will devil's advocate, and I will say, even if there wasn't a sense of humiliation involved here or any kind of vindictiveness, even if those Twitter weirdos are right and this really was innocent, wouldn't you think, even though I don't mean anything by this could be viewed in a very bad light? It's a garbage bag. Maybe I should think of a different way to do this. No matter how you look at it, it's just dumb that they would do this. It's mind-boggling.
Well, let me ask, I guess Reg, I'll ask you this. Do you think because there's part of me that does wonder, is this just, when is a garbage bag just a garbage bag, right? And I do wonder, like, whether this is a situation where somebody's told, "Look, Mickie James is no longer with the company. We need to send some intern, gather up her belongings, and we'll send them back to her. You need something big enough to contain all her stuff. you get a garbage bag and you put it all in it. So do you think it's possible that this is innocent? And innocent doesn't mean, it can be innocent and also be oblivious, right?
Right.
Because the optics are so bad. Or do you assume that this was intentional and kind of a direct message?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what Brian says. It's like, it's the wrestling business. They still do nasty things that they've been doing from the beginning. It could have been like a ha-ha in the beginning, like, let's just put Jillian Hall stuff in a garbage bag. That's funny. Like, she's out of here. Let's get rid of the trash. I think this could be a malicious thing. It's the wrestling business. They do nasty things like this all the time still, all out through the industry. And this time they just got caught. I think it just became the norm. They're like, another woman wrestler, get another trash bag. It's probably a joke in the back there. They probably all joke and high five about it. And this time it caught up to them.
Yeah. What if, Brian, what if this was happening with men also? Would it make it less bad?
If it was happening with men also, then you could at least say maybe they're just really tone deaf. Maybe they're just not realizing how this is going to look. The fact that it's just the women, and then you look at, their history of dealing with the female talent, that's where it really raises the red flag. And it goes back to what I was saying too earlier on, where it's like, the women's revolution and all that stuff, like that's a marketing thing. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't trickle down to the entire mentality of the company, especially if they're doing this, because if this is a company that's saying, yay, women rule, and we're going to put them in the main event, and they can be taken seriously. But when we fire them, we're going to send them all their stuff in a garbage bag, but we're not going to do that to the men,
right?
Because
I'd be curious if that
says it all. That says it all.
I don't know. I'm somewhat willing to give WWE the benefit of the doubt here. Not to say that it's not crass and really oblivious, but maybe not a direct message. It might be just as, again, as oblivious as thinking like, well, we need something. You take that extra step of emptying the garbage bag into the box, and you don't have a problem here, right? I would think.
You know what I'd be interested. Now you sound like those guys on Twitter. Right? but I'm going to say one thing about this, and this is another reason why it's a red flag to me. If you look at the regimes of talent relations, so like for example, it sounds to me like, okay, so if you have Jillian Hall saying it happened to her, and I didn't really hear, I didn't hear people like Trish or Lita or people like that say that they haven't, and if it had happened to them, I feel like they would have come.
Well,
forward.
you have to be released, right?
But here's the thing, though. I feel like the sense I'm getting is if this is a tradition, it started during like the Johnny Ace era. So I don't think JR was doing this, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think like JJ Dillon was doing this way back when. I think this is like something, it sounds like, and look, I don't know for a fact, it sounds like something that Laurinaitis kind of started, and he did not have the greatest track record with handling female talent at all. That's a known fact, especially after JR. That was definitely
barely can handle the men too.
Right. But that was a step down. Look, Johnny Ace was the guy that was, like I said this to you before, Al, like he was looking in swimwear catalogs and saying, hire this girl. And that's how people were getting hired. And everybody knew, JR had an idea. JR was responsible for the era of Trish and Lita and Victoria and Jackie, and being we should promote the athleticism of these women. He was limited in what he could do, but he was known for that. And when Johnny Ace took over, it was definitely seen as a step down. That's when you started getting these women that had no, oh, don't worry, we'll teach them how to wrestle. Who cares? They look really hot.
The Diva Search.
Right. That was Diva Search. Yes. That was during the Johnny Ace thing. And I feel like this might have been a culture that grew at that time, and that Mark Carano during his time was just continuing what was already being done. That's part of why it looks nefarious to me, because I think it's something that was done during a period when female talent was not always being treated the best. That's
right.
all.
And it's worth noting, John Laurinaitis is back, right?
Yes,
right. And I'm just reading now, apparently he issued an apology. I don't know if that means him taking responsibility for it, but Yeah, I wonder if, is it a coincidence?
Crazy coincidence.
Yeah, that this happened in the era where he was last there, and now happened again.
As far as Carano, because Maria said it happened to her, and this was only like a year or two ago. So,
okay.
But I think that not the first time that she was let go. So I think, but I think like in the case of Carano, I get the feeling that the Johnny Ace coming back was slightly before this whole thing happened. And I feel like they wanted Carano out anyway. And I think that this was just like a convenient way to get rid of him. I mean, like they made him take the fall for this. And I think they probably wanted him out. And then this was the reason.
Yeah. Reg, do you think, I mean, it makes me think of this question. Should the head of talent be a wrestling guy? I mean, it was sort of a wrestling person's job for a long time, as long as there's that job existed. But Jim Ross was probably the most famous one and held that job for a long time.
Right.
Then John Laurinaitis. But then, like they've done it with so many of these back office jobs in WWE, they've just gone the corporate side, right? And it's just kind of moving further and further away from wrestling people. But when you're talking about handling talent, right? Does it seem like something that should be a wrestling person's job? The flip side, as you touched on, wrestling people, especially of a certain age, a certain generation, come with a lot of bad habits from years ago. And maybe there's something to be said for introducing someone who is more up to speed with the way corporate America operates in 2020.
Right. Yeah, I think it's hard because on one hand, you want a wrestler that can relate to the wrestlers and knows what it's like to be even fired by another wrestler. But then exactly like you said, they come with these old habits and we used to do things this way, and they bring that back to the current day, and you get a situation like this where somebody's things in a trash bag. But I would say I would rather have a wrestler in the position just because you can relate more to the situations of everything that's going on. And it feels just when they start giving up too many positions to corporate, it just like you can feel that. It feels like that comes across in all other aspects, and just having more wrestling personalities and more wrestling minds just usually makes everything better, I think.
I agree with Reg, because I just want to say too, I think when they do that, then you get more respect from the talent. Those people respect the talent because they go, well, they went through what I did. And even in the case of JR, like he wasn't an in-ring talent, but all of the talent respected JR because of his proven head for the business and the fact that he'd been involved in the business for so many years. You know, they respected him. Then you had people like, Pat Patterson was the original guy, and they all respected the hell out of him. And J.J. Dillon, of course, and even John Laurinaitis, who had a lot of flaws, like he still had that respect. I mean, for better or worse, he struck like terror in that locker room. I could tell you that. Like people straightened up when he walked by. And that's not always a good thing. But I think what happened, it almost felt like they were doing it intentionally, was that position almost became one of less authority and respect. I worked with Mark Carano when I was there 20 years ago. He was a gopher. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He was a backstage gopher. He was like, send Carano to go do this and do that. And he was a guy that the talent sometimes like kind of goofed on. Mm-hmm. And as being a backstage guy, like a runner almost. And so when I found out that he was head of talent relations, I was like, what? What are you talking? Like even the name, his name just conjured up images of I'm sorry, Mark, but like this kind of like goofy guy, like sort of haplessly running around backstage. And it got me thinking, like, okay, so they want somebody like that. They must want somebody like that, like a stooge that they can sort of get to do what they want, rather than a very headstrong, powerful person like Laurinaitis or Ross or Dillon or whoever that they can't like push around. I think that's been company wide. It's like they seem to really want these people that they could just sort of like push around and tell what to do.
Yeah, I think with bringing Laurinaitis back, I think I thought I read that the idea was to kind of split the job, and then you'd have the guy who was handling talent, I guess, more on the corporate side, and then you had the other guy who would be sort of the liaison to the wrestlers, more interfacing with them. And I guess
good cop, bad cop.
Both. Yeah, right. The Laurinaitis pick is kind of an odd one because he didn't have the greatest reputation, right, among a lot of the wrestlers. Right. I think respected as a former wrestler, but as you touched on, the shift from the Ross era to the Ross was Randy Orton and Brock Lesnar and John Cena and The Rock and I think John Laurinaitis and I think Heidenreich. Right. I mean, that was sort of.
But I think hiring the wrong one-legged wrestler. That's what I think.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. You're right. He kind of. I think the general view was, wow, this is really a shift and not in a good way. But also, I think part of it was that Laurinaitis and this is the beginning of that whole way of thinking. Laurinaitis was seen as more of a yes man than JR. Right. JR and Vince had a very, very contentious antagonistic relationship. It was like this love-hate thing where Vince knew that all the talent loved him, and Vince knew that he had a great head for the business, but they constantly butted heads and didn't get along, and JR would stand up to him a lot and tell him he was wrong, And I think that no matter how much I sometimes hear things where they'll say, well, Vince loves to have people there that aren't yes men or whatever. And I don't know if that's really true or not, because the Laurinaitis thing certainly doesn't bear that out, because that's a huge reason of why he got that spot was because he knew how to play the political game. That was the one part of the job that JR wasn't the best at doing, was the political side of it, Yeah.
Ross talks a lot about that in his book and his podcast all the time. And I mean, in some ways, I guess Ross was perfect for that job because he wasn't a yes man, but he also would, I think by his own admission, put up with a lot. Right. I mean, they dragged him through the coals, humiliated him publicly over and over and over again.
And in the office too. I could tell you it was really uncomfortable. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a guy who would stand his ground and speak back, but also wasn't going to leave. Right. So, I guess maybe the best of both worlds. All right, guys. Well, this was a lot of fun. We covered a lot of ground here. I appreciate it. Reg, anything you want to plug?
Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Please get your copy. In the last issue, that Jonathan Gresham article, I did it, and it turned out great. I have my own reoccurring column in there. It's called the Righteous Wrap Up. It just started. First one's on Trish Adora. blackwrestlance.com is where you can find some of my writing that's not in there. And on Twitter, Righteous Reg is really where it's at.
Since you brought it up real quick, what do you see as the upside to Jonathan Gresham? I think he's fantastic. I mean, do you see him as kind of a real breakout star from Ring of Honor?
Yeah, I think that him being pure champion right now is going to be the stepping stone to being really that guy. I think with the work that he's doing right now, the promos that he's doing, that match with who you have an interview with, Dak Draper, was insane. One of the best matches of that 19th anniversary show. And I don't think a lot of people expected that. And I think that's what Jonathan Gresham is going to be. And that's how he is. He's really, we kind of relate him to Bryan Danielson Daniel Bryan, because you can get behind him. His matches will make you a fan of him. He doesn't have to talk. He doesn't have to do anything. When you watch a match and at the end of it, you're just like, wow, this guy is different. He's on another level. And I think he's going to use that to excel to the next level. He's going to be Ring of Honor World Champion one day. And I think carrying the company, I think this run right now with the Pure Championship is setting that up. He's incredible.
Can he get past that though? I mean, in as much as over the years, Ring of Honor has been like the stepping stone to greatness in WWE, and you look at, I mentioned it to Dak, you look at the WrestleMania card and just top to bottom Ring of Honor graduates all over it. It's kind of been a while since it's been like that, since Ring of Honor's been pumping out stars at that caliber. Can Jonathan Gresham get there? Does he have too much against him in that he's pretty small, even by
he's small, yeah.
Honor standards. What is he? He's got to be 5'6".
Yeah, he's like 5'7", 5'8", maybe. He's pretty small. He's probably 5'6". He's shorter than I am. WWE, I don't know. I think with the advent of like AEW, like he could be world champion in AEW, like no problem, and people would believe it'd be everything you want. But I think WWE is still kind of in that we like big guys. Like, is Adam Cole ever gonna be a main roster world champion? I don't know. Like, I don't know if they'll ever get past him being shorter than the other guys. So in WWE, I don't know. It's up in the air, really. Things are changing constantly. Things are changing on a daily, weekly basis. You're seeing wrestlers you wouldn't 5 years ago, like you wouldn't see them there, and they're here now, and they're making their way. But I don't know if he can make it to the tippy top just with how they still judge talent and they still run things, like Bobby Lashley's the champion for a reason. He's giant. He's a monster.
I think the Daniel Bryan comparison is a good one, but you also have to remember, Daniel Bryan was working the indies for a dozen years or more before
a long time.
He got a break in WWE, and it was because of that, in part because of his size and because he just was sort of plain looking and had this style that you wondered how well other wrestlers could work with him.
Right.
He was on this higher level.
And Vince was high on Bobby Lashley even 15 years ago when he first came in.
Yeah.
Right.
He wasn't really ready at that time, and Vince just didn't care just because of the way he looked. I mean, that got him through the door, and he was green as grass.
I would have never have predicted that Bobby Lashley would be what he is now, because it felt like we already saw the arc with him, right? I mean, he got at one point, it was like the Lex Luger push in WWE,
right.
and in that it was sort of against the grain. Fans were not receptive to Bobby Lashley, commiserate to the push he was getting back in 2007, and then left, went to Impact, kind of was on the tail end of his career. They bring him back, and it's like, all right, he's a nice guy to have a couple years ago. And now at whatever he is, 42, 43 years old, 16, 17 years in the building, now is doing his best work. It's like, and it really feels like it was just about finding the right package. And I think MVP had a ton to do with that, right? I mean, what a great mouthpiece MVP is, and something we've talked about so many times. It speaks to the value of a good manager, which is like this lost art form in pro wrestling,
which they still hate in WWE, even though they have Malcolm Bivens. I think could be he could take somebody to world championship status tonight if they would give him a chance, but they're just still so against managers. The funny thing about Lashley though is I was watching, I think it was Extreme Rules 2017. They've kind of been setting up this push for him for a while. He was in a main event match with Roman Reigns back then, and he defeated Roman Reigns pretty handedly. I've seen moments like that through the last couple of years he's been here, that they've been kind of setting, and it might have been 18. I don't know, remember exactly. One of those Extreme Rules, but he wrestled Roman Reigns and he kind of dominated him. They've been kind of setting up this run for a long time, even going back to the Trump thing. I think they were we want to give this guy his moment. The fans didn't really attach onto him early on, but WWE's been trying to set him up for a long time, it feels like.
Yeah, he headlined a year ago, right, with Drew McIntyre. He had a main event with Drew McIntyre on an off-brand pay-per-view less than a year ago, I think.
Yeah, he's one of those few guys that really actually benefited in a big way by going over to Impact. I think it actually made him more marketable than he was before. I actually think that Ron Killings was another guy like that, but I mean, it didn't wind up where he was at in TNA Impact, but going there made him more valuable than he had been before.
Yeah. Reg, I'd be remiss also if we didn't ask you about your thoughts on the Hurt Business breaking up.
My God! Don't even do this to me.
King Shelton. And Cedric kind of, no higher than they really almost coming out of this having gained nothing. It's really surprising and kind of deflating.
They haven't even done anything. They're just last time MVP on Raw was oh, you think Mace and T-Bar are part of the Hurt Business? They're not, but he didn't say anything about what's going to happen. They haven't set up the future. They just have it feels like Cedric and Shelton are just job guys now. I don't know. I'm still recovering from the New Day breakup. They keep doing these things to me. I don't why are you guys doing this? Why do you hate if you're a world champion, you can't have friends. That's WWE's thing. No friends. You got there. You have to stay there on top as a lonely loser. That's their favorite thing to do. You can't have friends. No one, nothing. And they always break these groups up. It's the reason that Bobby Lashley got to where he was is because of the Hurt Business. Yeah. Why would you take that away from him? If you're trying to set Big E up to being the next Universal Champion, the reason that people like Big E is because of the New Day. Why would you take the New Day away? You don't have to break these people up. I just do not.
But I think New Day is actually one of the great exceptions, though. I mean, if you look at how long, I mean, no group gets to stay together forever, right? And I mean,
True.
if you look at their run, I mean, it's been in the modern era. I mean, it's pretty huge. It's pretty unprecedented.
It's long.
I think they've actually been together probably longer than any team, in like WWE history. I mean,
I think so. No, you're right.
Hell of a run. But the Hurt Business, no. And it speaks to me when people talk about how they will intentionally pull things back if they get over too much. Which is crazy to think about. But you look at things like that, and that's the only explanation. It's like they were getting over too much. I think they were also afraid they were getting over as baby faces. It was like too much, and they had to like bring it in, like rein it in, instead of just going with it and seeing where it goes.
Yeah. I've kind of racked my head trying to think what was the rationale behind this. I was even half expecting it to be kind of a swerve and Cedric to show up at WrestleMania at his corner, because it just doesn't make any sense to me that you'd break up such a hot act so quickly. And the only thing I can come to is that they see, even after the Hurt Business getting over as well as it did, they see Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander as bottom of the card guys, right? And they don't want their big star associated.
Right, exactly.
I think that they think that he's above it, and rather than lifting up Cedric and Shelton, they thought that they could potentially be pulling down Lashley, which I think is just wrong, oblivious, not being aware of what a hot act they were really onto something special, something that they were kind of a horseman kind of vibe, and it
was great.
Yeah, and they weren't just kind of along for the ride. Those guys were great. They were doing really, really good work, and it's just a shame. I mean, if they spun off into something that was hot and exciting, it'd be one thing, but they're just back to being like job guys now.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, a real pity. Anyway, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it. We'll do it again soon. Right now, let's hear from Ring of Honor up-and-comer Dak Draper. Okay, so I'm fascinated by it's still the ROH bubble, right?
We're not. So I'm not here for the bubble yet. The bubble's going to be in like 3 weeks. But I moved out here for to train at the dojo like 2.5 years ago, and I've just never left.
Okay, yeah. What's the bubble like?
Yes.
I mean, and how strict is this bubble? And is it still as strict as it was a year ago? I guess a year ago you guys weren't doing anything. Yeah.
Oh, let me get on my my 5G real quick. There we go, or 4G, whatever it is. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my Wi-Fi kind of sucks. The bubble is like, it's definitely more, it's really strict. It sucked at first because it was like, the first one was like a week long, and you had like, I think testing just wasn't as good then. Like the rapid tests weren't as available. So it was like, we had like 5 days where you just didn't see anybody. And now it's like you check in, and then like the next day you take a COVID test. And then like, once you pass your COVID test, like you can go to the dojo and like put your matches together and stuff. Yeah. And so you see more people now, but they're super strict about it. Like the Maryland Athletic Commission, like they'll kind of troll around the hotel a little bit, kind of looking for guys out in the hallway and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's I hated it at first, but it's become like a necessary evil. And I don't know, I think having no fans too has helped me to improve some areas where I used to really kind of lean on the fans and lean in for crowd participation. And it's really helped me to like strengthen some of those weaknesses.
I've heard that from a lot of people, that in a roundabout way, maybe this makes them better performers, right? And it gets you to kind of train this muscle that you otherwise wouldn't have any reason to train.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. That said, are you anxious to get some fans back in the building? I don't know if that's it. God, yes. It looks like you're kind of on your way, right? I mean, you see the vaccination rates now around 40% for the whole country. So is the hope that maybe by the end of 2021, you'll be performing in front of fans?
I really hope that before Christmas time, before the holidays in 2021, I really hope that I wrestle in front of fans again, because like, man, the last show I had in front of fans was First Wrestling on March 7th, 2020.
Wow.
And so I haven't been in front of a crowd since. And I think everybody's like super excited to have fans back, because like you look at like, I feel like the quality of matches that Ring of Honor is putting out right now, and it would just be amplified so much if we had fans there too. So I think everybody's chomping at the bit to get fans. And like, it seems like it's just like, I don't know anything like official, but just kind of hearing how everybody's feeling, just kind of the temperature or the pulse of everything. It seems like people are pretty enthusiastic about us getting fans back before the end of the year. So hopefully it happens.
What do you remember about that last match on March 7th? I mean, it was, there was very much conversation at the time about the coronavirus. People didn't know what it was. What did you think? Did you think maybe we won't be able to wrestle for a few weeks, and by, April or May, everything will be back to normal?
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it'll be 2 weeks off. I could use the 2 weeks to kind of recover and reset. And then here we are, where I'm like, that was the last time I ever looked a fan in the eye. Like,
yeah.
And the thing is too, like that show too, I don't know if you've ever seen a First Wrestling show in Minneapolis. It's Eric Cannon's promotion. It is like crowd participation. It's like they've built up such a good following that it's like, it is a show with a crowd. So it was like a good way to send it off in a bang. I didn't know that we were sending anything off with a bang, but because like I don't think any shows had been canceled up to that point, or none that I had heard of.
Right. Yeah.
And then the next week, the anniversary show had gotten canceled. So
what were you going to do on that show?
I wasn't booked.
Okay, well, I guess that worked out.
So the match that I had against Gresham at the last anniversary show was like that. Really, really, like I feel like I really had a chip on my shoulder, like going into that, because the year before I wasn't booked on the anniversary show, and so I felt like I really like had something to prove there.
Yeah, that's a thing that I imagine is going to be interesting when fans are back at Ring of Honor. You're really you have a completely different role than you had before, right? I mean, you're in a weird way, your profile has grown while the fans have gone. Certainly coming off of the last show and the match with Jonathan Gresham. So, is there an extra a bit of sort of enthusiasm, anxiousness to see how fans receive Dak Draper in 2021?
Absolutely. I feel like the amount, like I've known for years that Dak Draper's good, but I feel like the amount of fans that knew or would acknowledge that Dak Draper is good was like this size, and it's grown considerably. So I'm really excited, and I'm excited for it, but it's also one of those things where it's like I hope that my expectations aren't too high. Mm-hmm. I guess I don't want to get out ahead of myself. I don't want to count my chickens before they've hatched. But like, I'm really excited, and I foresee like the fans that have been watching. I always feel like I'm better live anyway. I'm better to see live than to see on TV, and so hopefully that all carries over. Like I'm confident that it will, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and it's tricky because I imagine some amount of fans that like watching Ring of Honor live have not been following on TV. So when they return, they might not be that familiar with your act, right?
What is Dak Draper doing? Yeah. It's like, I feel like I was just, cause like, I had just, the last ROH show we had, I had faced Dragon Lee for the TV title. And it was like the TV title shot that I had gotten from winning the Top Prospect tournament. So I still feel like I was like viewed as this prospect guy, where it's like I was still a new guy, not this established guy on the roster. And I feel like through the bubbles and through the tapings in the pandemic, I've established myself as a player on the roster. And so I'm excited, and it's hard to admit, but I am a little bit nervous to see just to see how they adjust to it and how they adapt to it. Like wrestlers' worst fear is you walk out and it's just crickets, like no boos, no cheers. So as long as there aren't crickets, as long as there's noise, I'll be good.
Yeah.
If there are crickets, we should just go back to no fans.
Yeah. You talk about making that change and taking a bigger role in Ring of Honor. How much of that was something that you changed in your act, the way you carry yourself, and how much of it was just people taking notice, the shot callers taking notice of what you brought to the table?
I think a lot of it was just time. Like the timing of the pandemic that it happened was. I was still getting the chance to kind of prove myself and to establish myself. And we had just, the dojo system the Ring of Honor dojo system was so brand new. Like we had that original class of the Dojo 5, the first 5 dojo signings for Ring of Honor. And I feel like it was more like you didn't see us doing the stuff that the guys are doing now, with the dojo guys are doing now, where it's their wrestling pure matches on the show and stuff like that. It was like we were all kind of like, you would see Brian Johnson and Joe Keys and Dante and Dixon. They were all in the Top Prospect tournament too, but we were all new guys. And so I feel like it's really just, I think the perception of me has changed. And I think part of that's just been being around the ROH roster. That's a huge part, just being around the guys that have been there. Guys like Matt Taven and Mike Bennett, like they're always there when I get to the back, and they're always there to like kind of give me some critiques and stuff, but mostly they're there to tell me that I'm doing a good job and tell me that they like what I'm doing. And I think that might be the biggest thing, like getting the acceptance of my peers. Like each time you go out and you come back and you feel like you made somebody who didn't care a little bit more. I think that's probably been the thing that's helped me most, is becoming comfortable in the ROH locker room and realizing that, like, yeah, I'm in here with like some of the best wrestlers on the planet, but I can hang with these guys. And so I think a lot of it's been me, just with my confidence and realizing that I can hang and being willing to try stuff. And so mostly it's been me, I think, just finding my comfort, finding my zone.
Yeah. Did you deal with confidence issues? I mean, I know at one point, you were assigned with WWE, a developmental deal, and then get released. Does that do something to your confidence, make you question, do I really have what it takes?
So my confidence was at its lowest when I was signed to WWE. When I was in NXT, I was so new when I got signed. Like I barely knew what I was doing. I think I had trained for like 7 months with Pat Tanaka. It was great training, but I didn't know how the wrestling business worked. And I think it's really easy for new guys, especially like promising athletes. Like I was a college athlete, to come into that system, and you just tried really hard to be the best wrestling student you can instead of becoming the best wrestler you can. Mm-hmm. And so I got really wrapped up in becoming the best wrestling student. And when you do that, you only base how you're doing off how the coaches are treating you. And so my confidence was just like rock bottom. Every day that I walked into the performance center, my last like 6 months there, I was like, they might fire me today. And that's no way to go through wrestling. Yeah. Like there's no way to like, and I was still learning. That's no way to learn. And so getting released actually like really boosted my confidence, because Chris Hero and I became really good friends, because I was a big Kings of Wrestling fan before I got signed, before I got in, became a pro wrestler. And so I met him there. He was released a little bit before I was, and just talking to him about how much fun he was having on the independents, about new stuff he was trying out. And I wasn't able to like try something new out in a match or try new stuff. I couldn't really be creative, and I couldn't create on my own. And so when I got released, I was like, okay, cool. I can get good now. I can go out and I can create on my own. I can learn how to think in wrestling. And like Chris Hero was always kind of there watching my matches to like, I'd send him a match and he would always send me his critiques and tell me, oh yeah, maybe do this instead. But it wasn't like I wasn't being kept in a box. It was like I'd get pulled back. I would get really far out and then get pulled back. And that did wonders for my confidence. Like I've never really been somebody who's had confidence issues. Like if you ask my mom, she'd be like, oh no, he's always been super cocky. But I feel like there are different varying shades of it. And a lot of times that can be a cover too, where if you're always the guy that sees yourself as number one, being number two really sucks. And that can really like be a big blow to you. And so I think that prepared me for coming into another big company or another wrestling company that has really good guys with just how to carry myself. And it helped me find my confidence a lot quicker. Because when I was in NXT, I never found my confidence.
Yeah. But I imagine some people would not want to kind of start all over again that way, right? I mean, when you're that close to the big time, to the show, you're, WWE on your paycheck, and you've got the infrastructure and the resources WWE provides. And to go from that to, I imagine, I mean, probably as humble sort of
oh my God,
setting as you can. I don't know, getting changed in the classroom or whatever it is, in front of little gyms. Did you ever have questions about, whether I still want to do this?
So I never really had questions if I still wanted to do it. There were questions, should I still do this?
Yeah.
When I got released, it was when I was in developmental, and I had such an unrealistic view of the independents. And also the culture at the time was like, well, if you get released from here, you'll go be the Ring of Honor champion or something. Like the culture was just that, if you're a brand new guy in NXT, that means you're still really good in the scheme of wrestling. And it was shocking to find out that like, oh, you're nobody. Like You're just a name that was on a list of releases. And it was kind of it was eye-opening seeing that my post about getting released was far and away my most interacted with tweet at that point. And I was like, oh, this is a really bad thing. Like, that's when I realized, like, oh, this is, I haven't done anything yet. Like, everything that I thought was like a big milestone and stuff, like appearing on NXT TV and stuff like that, I was like, oh yeah, that's really good. It all seems so small then. Mm-hmm. And when I was like, oh, I'm just like, getting fired was the biggest thing that I did for this company. Great. And then I was like, well, I'm sending my rates out to promoters and I'm not getting responses on, like, people reach out and ask for my rate, and my rate was way too high because I just thought that I'd have this drawing power just from having been in NXT. So it took a little bit, but I realized, like, you're starting at zero again. And once I accepted that is when I really started getting better. I went from Travis Tyler to Sammy Six Guns. And it's like, I feel like I built myself back up. And then I got an opportunity to become Dak Draper and to move from Colorado to Kansas City. And it was like, I reinvented myself again. And I feel like there have been 3 times where I've like started on the bottom and built myself back up. And each time I've gotten better each time for it. So it's been daunting each time, but I'm so thankful that I've done it each time, that I've like been able to humble myself enough to do it, really.
Right. Did you see Ring of Honor as especially a good opportunity given their track record? I mean, you just watch WrestleMania and look up and down the card, and it's just all Ring of Honor graduates. So did you see that, like, this is the place to be?
Oh yeah. Like, it's funny, when I moved, so I lived in Florida when I got released. I moved back to Colorado, and I was like, oh yeah, Ring of Honor will probably call anytime soon, because I didn't know anything. I was dumb. And so they were always a goal. There were always a goal for me, and always somebody. Even when I was in NXT, I viewed Ring of Honor as like, if someone came from Ring of Honor into the Performance Center, it's like, oh, you're really good. Yeah, like, it's just, the bell to bell is going to be really good.
It's like having like a Harvard on your resume, right?
Yeah. It for real is. It's such a feather in your cap. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'll probably get called by Ring of Honor. And then as I started to realize where I stood in the scheme of wrestling, I was like, oh, I've still got a long way to go. Like, there are levels in between that I didn't even know existed 2 months ago. And so I realized that I really needed to like take it on myself to try and build my way up to being like a Ring of Honor caliber wrestler. And then I did one of the dojo camps in 2016, one of the their tryout/seminars that they do. And that really made me realize, especially when I'm coming from Colorado and going to Bristol, PA, where nobody knows who you are, about just like, oh yeah, I can't just be the guy that's like big and handsome and used to be in developmental. Like, you can't just be that guy. Like, they're not going to sign that guy. They're not going to book that guy on their shows. And so that was like eye-opening for me. And I've heard a few people say this about those camps. Like, that was eye-opening for me in a bad way about my own wrestling. Like, I had to take inventory of myself. Like, I couldn't explain my character in an elevator pitch or anything like that. And they're asking me what I am. I'm like, well, I'm Sammy Six Guns. Like, yeah, well, what's Sammy Six Guns besides a guy with a weird name? And I'm like, I don't know. Actually, so Christopher Daniels asked me that. And I was like, and I'm like, and he interrupts me and he goes, what separates you from Evan Bourne, or you from Matt Sydal? And I was like, and obviously I'm tall. I'm like almost a foot taller, but I was like, I didn't want to say that. And so I was like, I could also do comedy. And Daniels got so mad at me. It was like his eyes crossed while he was looking at me like, oh, you can do comedy. Great. And just walked off. And I was like, this did not go well.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. You touched on it. And I've thought the same thing. You know, once upon a time, right, being 6'5", you seem like, well, this guy's got it in the bag, right? And in a roundabout way, that can work against you these days, right? Especially in a company like Ring of Honor, where folks might automatically dismiss you as like, oh, here's just another 6'5" jock who doesn't have much else but the size, right?
Absolutely. I feel like that happens a lot with I feel like fans are going to cheer for someone they kind of can see themselves in.
Right. Yeah. It's
a lot of baby faces. Yeah. It's really trended that way a lot. And not a lot of people sitting on the other side of the guardrail see themselves in Dak Draper, and more of them should, but they don't. And confidence issues. No, but it's almost been it was frustrating at first, and then you just kind of have to realize, like, yeah, there's nothing you can do about that. But also, it's one of those things where you get so indoctrinated and like, oh yeah, well, you're big, you should go work for WWE. It's like there's only so many spots for big guys in WWE, and I think the big thing is I found out what I wanted my wrestling journey to look like, or my wrestling career to look like, and I wanted to be more than just getting a paycheck. Like I wanted to be more than paid well. I wanted to have the good matches, and I wanted to be more of like a Barry Windham than a Nathan Jones.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Yeah. And the weird thing is in WWE, you wouldn't be all that big, right? I mean, you'd still be, I guess, on the taller end, but yeah, the big fish, small pond kind of thing. And in Ring of Honor, you're towering over everyone.
Oh yeah, that was a funny thing too. Just the group that I came in with too. I started around the same time as like Baron Corbin and Mojo and guys like that, where it was like, even if I was as tall as somebody, like they still had like 30 or 40 pounds on me. So my move set when I first started on the indies was like, it's a lot of like chain wrestling stuff and like things that I could do to Baron Corbin in a practice match, but I'm doing it to guys that I outweigh by like 60 pounds and I'm like 6 inches taller than. And it looked silly when I'm like doing these little, like when I'm like reverse, I'm not using my size with guys. So it took a lot of learning for me to realize like, oh yeah, if I'm in this company, I need to wrestle this way. But if I'm in a company like where I'm just a normal sized guy, then I need to wrestle this way. And I feel like I've done a good job in learning that and taking inventory of what I do and what I do well.
Yeah. I hadn't seen a lot of your work or even followed Ring of Honor all that closely over the last year, and then I watched the anniversary show and just blown away with your match with Jonathan Gresham. It's why I asked Mark in particular to talk to you, and in part because you've got Jonathan Gresham, right, who is seen as like the absolute elite of this type of wrestling, technical wrestling. I think everybody assumed he would be the pure champion when they set up the tournament, and so you see the 6'5", jock guy working with him. It's like, well, is this going to be a mess? Like what's this going to look like? And it was my favorite match on the show. I thought you guys did just a great job. So how important was that match for you to show that I could work this style, I could hang with the very best, and a high profile match on a big show?
I knew that as soon as I found out that we were going to wrestle, I knew it was going to be the most important match of my life. Like I knew that like perception wise, like wrestling, it's all built on perception. And perception wise, I knew that I was going to have to rise to the occasion, that I was going to have to be crisp with everything. I was going to have to like come in with good ideas, of course, just really work well with Gresham. And I was happy when it was over, regardless of how it went. I knew I was going to be happy when it was over, just because like it's like almost like pulling a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Where it's like you got your moment of truth. And it was like getting ready for the NCAA championships when I was wrestling in college. Like that's how it felt, where the way that I prepared for it was like I was going to Maryland Championship Wrestling. I was going to MCW and getting in the ring multiple times a week, doing 2-a-days with my training. Just, it was one of those things. It almost felt like it was a sink or swim moment, really, where it was like, you're either going to stay, oh yeah, this guy's the 6'5" guy that just like, yeah, we can put him in against new guys and be kind of a gatekeeper, or really try and take my destiny into my own hands and show that I have something more than just being built the way that I am.
Yeah. Did you feel you came out of that match on the other end elevated on a higher level? I mean, are you now thinking about that world title scene in Ring of Honor?
Oh yeah. So I've moved back to the television division, and I've moved back to the TV division, but I keep my eye on those world title rankings for sure. It's one of those things for me with like, I feel like eventually when you see the work now, when you see how the match with Gresham went, when you see how my subsequent matches go, it's I feel like there's no way that you can look at me and not think, well, the world title is probably in his future, or at least think that I'm going to be chasing the world title at some point.
Yeah. And there's an opening there, right? I mean, frankly, I mean, it sort of feels like Ring of Honor could use some freshening up in its main event scene. As fantastic as Jay Lethal is, he's like the dean of Ring of Honor at this point, but we've seen him in that mix for a long time, and now Rush has been the champion for a while. It feels like there could the Ring of Honor could use some fresh contenders up top. So is that the hope that, like, you cash in on that opening?
I think you said that very well, and I would love to cash in on that opening.
Yeah.
I would love to slide into that spot into that opening. But I think the biggest thing I've learned in kind of reinventing myself is like, you always think that there's a spot, and it's really just, you have to make your own spot.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I think when the most lulls I've had in my career have been when I've waited for a spot and waited for stuff. And like when I moved out to Baltimore to start training at the Ring of Honor dojo, like they weren't signing people to contracts. They weren't signing people to contracts that were training out there at all. I just moved out here because I wanted to get better at wrestling.
Yeah.
What I was doing in Kansas City had dried up, and I was like, yeah, I just want to get better, and kind of made my own spot. We like encouraged that through our actions and through how we did it, encouraged Ring of Honor to sign some of us to contracts. And so for me, it's like, yes, I am definitely taking the steps to try and make my own spot in the main event picture of Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
And that's not a secret for me.
How do you do that? And I know it's kind of there's a lot involved, but is it, I imagine in some ways there's more opportunity to do it now because social media and because everybody's got an HD, phone, HD camera in their pocket at all times. So is it really kind of like going into business yourself, using social media, getting the character out there, doing stuff like this, interviews as much as you can?
I think part of it is, but I think the biggest part of it to me is that bell to bell is showing that you really have what it takes bell to bell, because like, eventually, like, I feel like it all kind of comes out in the wash eventually. And bell to bell, if I look the way I do, if I'm as athletic as I am, and then I can perform in the ring the way that I am, people can't help but notice. Yeah. And so for me, like, if I should post more videos, I should make a lot more videos. I should be more active on social media. I'm pretty active, but I should be more active. But for me, I put my physical, like my in-ring training and my training in the gym and my cardio, I always put that ahead of that, because at the end of the day, like, I want my in-ring work to be the best thing.
Yeah.
So I want that to be my main attribute.
Because that, I imagine it's frustrating that we still are dealing with the pandemic. Because I looked at your cage match before we talked, and you just haven't had a whole lot of opportunities to wrestle over the last couple of years, right? I mean, I don't know if it's been 24 matches in the last 2 years or so.
Oh, my cage fight?
No, your cage match, your listings of all your database with all your matches. Am I right?
I had an MMA fight when I was in college. I was like, oh, you watched?
Oh, no, not. But am I right? I mean, over the last couple of years, maybe you've worked a couple dozen matches officially. Is that about right?
It's officially, yeah. It was a frustrating year before. The bubbles actually were probably pretty helpful for me. When I first signed with the Ring of Honor dojo system, the plan was the former coach wanted to keep me hidden, and a few of us hidden, where it was like we weren't allowed to work independence anymore. And so I was just training at the dojo every day, and that's all I was getting from wrestling. And that, at the time, I thought it was killing me because I wasn't wrestling in front of fans. I wasn't having matches in front of fans. Turns out it was preparing me for these empty arena matches that we have now. But yeah, it's been especially feeling the way I do about how I want the work to be good. And I was coming off of NWL, which is where I was wrestling a lot. And to go from wrestling a lot and really feel like I was improving to just have all that stop, it was definitely frustrating. You feel lost, because you spend so much of your life going from a wrestling show on the weekend to a wrestling show on the weekend to all of a sudden it's just you train during the week and you don't wrestle in front of people at all.
No payoff, yeah.
Yeah, it became Groundhog Day. Everything kind of ran together. And I think about that time, like it was 6 months. And like, when I think back on it, like, I can't, like, it seems like it was like 2 years.
Yeah.
It seems like it lasted so much longer. And it's funny because like once I got put into the top prospect tournament, I was like, okay, cool. I can start having matches again. And it started to pick up again. And then the world shuts down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely been frustrating to have probably 5 times as many training matches or probably more than that, actually, probably 10 times as many training matches as I have actual matches in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's been super frustrating, but it's something I hate to do, but it's helped me.
Do you feel like Do you feel like the proverbial clock is ticking? Because you're not a kid, right? I mean, you're not the 20-something-year-old anymore. So I imagine part of you feels like this needs to happen pretty quick.
I felt like the clock was ticking until COVID happened.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that year off for COVID, at least for me, like it helped a lot of injuries heal. But it also kind of I feel like it kind of made your age in wrestling obsolete now.
Yeah.
Where it's just everybody had to take a year off. So it's not like, oh, being 30 is the kiss of death now. And it's funny that was even a thing before. I feel like that's only based off if you're trying to get signed to a WWE developmental contract, Yeah. And everybody acts like, oh, you're 30. Oh, that's pretty old. It's like, old for what? Like the earth?
And that's changed a lot, right? I mean, like you look at WWE's roster right now, and the average age of the top guys has got to be late 30s and maybe even around that 40 mark. If you look at a Bobby Lashley and AJ Styles and Bryan, and on, Roman Reigns is like a kid at whatever he is, 36, 37. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's all kind of trending like later. And you can see too, that people are just more, I feel like people, as the business evolves, people are more mature. They're a little bit more mature a couple of years later. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that guys would do if they're on the road and they're in their early 20s, like working for WWE, that they could never get away with now. They'd all be in jail now, I feel like it's just more of a the business, especially like Ring of Honor, WWE, even Impact. It's like, I feel like it's a lot more mature. Like everybody's a little bit older now, and things are just like, I don't know, it's probably less of a party.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched on it before, but do you lean on those older guys in the locker room who have been around for a while, whether it's the Briscoes or Jay Lethal or even a PCO who's really up there right now? Yeah.
So I lean really hard on Matt Taven and Mike Bennett. They've really been, also EC3. They've also EC3, not necessarily for Ring of Honor, but just wrestling in general. But Taven and Bennett have been kind of like almost like rocks for me, where they've just kind of, it's been really good to be able to be like, hey, is everything going all right with me? Like, is the perception of me okay and stuff? And just like to get a little bit of guidance from them. And they've been guys I've leaned on a lot. The guy I lean on the most is Chris Hero, for sure, just because he's got experience everywhere. Like I talk to Hero probably every day, just asking wrestling questions and what if I did this? And that's probably the person I lean on most. But in the Ring of Honor locker room, like Matt Taven specifically is somebody that I lean on a lot for just kind of that veteran guidance, because he's been in Ring of Honor for so long. We actually first met at a WWE tryout, and I'd known of him from seeing him do a little bit of stuff for ROH. It was right before the Top Prospect tournament, and before he won the Top Prospect tournament, and we met then. And so then our journeys, like we met, and then our journeys went separately. But it's been kind of cool to like peripherally watch him in ROH, and then to come in where he's a leader here, and just to be able to learn from him. And he's been awesome. Yeah. So Matt Taven is like my guy.
When you see guys who are like these ROH lifers, who aren't necessarily just passing through, and Taven, I guess, it maybe fits into that group, and guys like the Briscoes and some others. Is that how do you feel seeing that? I mean, does that let you know?
I love
that, is it something to aspire to, that you can make a home here for your whole career?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life, really. But I'm so happy at Ring of Honor, and it's like, it's one of those things where you're in control of your career. Like, this is how I imagined as a kid being a pro wrestler. This is how I imagined it being, where it's not like I'm not given scripts. I'm not having to conform to like this like invisible code or anything like that. You're taking it face value in Ring of Honor, and I think that's so valuable to be treated with respect like that. And so when I see guys like the Briscoes and I know Jay Lethal was in Ring of Honor, left and came back, but to see these guys, like, it makes me respect them so much, because they've done it on their own terms. When they could have gone and gotten a higher payday somewhere else, other things have been more valuable to them, and that it makes me respect them way more. And it's one of those things too, when whenever people are like, oh, you're a wrestler, you're going to go to WWE,
Right.
like WWE is like going to Disneyland or something. You can just go there. And it's like, well, it's one of those things where it's like, there's so many variables to that. But the main thing is like at Ring of Honor, especially the way they took care of us during the pandemic, but at Ring of Honor right now, like you can do things on your own terms. And there are certain things that Ring of Honor that Ring of Honor allows you to do that you wouldn't be allowed to do at other companies. Or I guess there's just like a certain there's just certain priorities you're allowed to have at Ring of Honor where those would have to go by the wayside if you're at other companies. And so, yeah, it makes me respect those guys more that they've held those priorities as more valuable than the almighty dollar.
What's the next step for Ring of Honor, right? I mean, they've got this great reputation built over 19 years, but you also have now a more crowded marketplace. A lot of other companies kind of delivering the same sort of calling card that Ring of Honor did for so long, as far as like the high octane athletic pro wrestling, whether it's AEW or it's even NXT. So what's the next step? What would you like to see Ring of Honor? What is that next step that they should take?
Well, I think the way that they presented the Pure Championship, or just the Pure Wrestling in general, and not even really just the Pure Wrestling, the way they brought back honor, about how honor, fairness, they made it seem so much more like a sport again, where I feel like with the high octane, with doing so many intricate spots and stuff like that, where a lot of times like it can be hard to follow for the casual fan. What I would like to see is I feel like we're kind of going in that direction. I feel like Ring of Honor is becoming something that you don't have to be a super fan to enjoy. I feel like I could turn on Ring of Honor now. Like there's an old lady at our gym that it was so funny to me. She said the other day, she goes, my favorite guy on Ring of Honor is Cheeseburger. Oh, what's his new name? World famous CB. Like she follows that closely that like and it's like she doesn't know anything. I'm just gonna move here. She doesn't know anything about wrestling. She doesn't know anything about wrestling, but she can follow Ring of Honor now. And I don't think she could have imagined her following like the Dragon Gate 6-mans and stuff like that. Yeah. Like she wouldn't have been able to follow that. So
more accessible.
I feel like Ring of Honor has almost become more digestible if you're not a super fan. Like I think it's becoming more digestible to the casual viewer. And that's the direction I'd like to see it go, because that's how you really grow, is when you're drawing new fans in that maybe they're sports fans and they see the athleticism of what we do, but they can understand it because of the way that it's presented. That's the way that I would like to see Ring of Honor go or trend.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what's next for Ring of Honor. I mean, I was at the Madison Square Garden show, and it looked like, Ring of Honor was riding high and we're ready to take that next step. And then obviously there's been some setbacks from there, but I think the product's great. I think you're fantastic, a big fan of your work. And thanks for doing this, man. This was a lot of fun.
Hey, thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great talking with you.
All right, man. Have a good one.